The crystal chandelier cast dancing shadows across Emma Brooks' marble floors as she glided through her Manhattan penthouse, champagne flute in hand, greeting the city's elite. But what happened next shocked everyone in attendance. Her piercing blue eyes suddenly locked onto something that would change everything she thought she knew about the quiet woman who had cleaned her home for 3 years. There, polishing the silver with methodical precision, stood Sarah Miller, her dark hair pulled back in a simple bun, wearing her usual black uniform. But it wasn't Sarah's familiar presence that made Emma's breath catch, it was the delicate bracelet adorning her wrist, catching the light with an almost hypnotic gleam. "Darling, you simply must try the caviar," gushed Margaret Wellington, one of Emma's closest friends from the country club. "It's flown and fresh from—" Margaret stopped mid-sentence, her gaze following Emma's transfixed stare. "My goodness, what an interesting piece," she murmured, gesturing towards Sarah's bracelet. Emma felt her pulse quicken. The bracelet appeared simple enough, oxidized silver with intricate engravings that seemed to tell a story. Yet something about its design struck her as oddly familiar, like a half-remembered melody from childhood. "Sarah," Emma called out, her voice carrying across the bustling room. "Could you bring us some more hors d'oeuvres?" Sarah looked up from her polishing, those deep brown eyes meeting Emma's for just a moment before she nodded. "Of course, Mrs. Brooks." As Sarah moved gracefully through the crowd, Emma found herself mesmerized by the way the bracelet caught the light with each gesture. Little did Emma know that this simple piece of jewelry would unravel secrets that had been buried for decades. "That's quite an unusual design," Margaret observed, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "The craftsmanship looks almost antique. Strange choice for someone in her position, don't you think?" Emma's mind raced. In all her years of collecting jewelry, pieces worth more than most people's homes, she had never seen anything quite like what Sarah wore so casually on her wrist. The engravings seemed to depict scenes, tiny figures dancing around the circumference in an endless celebration or ceremony. "I've been meaning to ask her about it," Emma lied smoothly, though the thought had never crossed her mind until this very moment. The party continued to buzz around them, but Emma found herself distracted, stealing glances at Sarah whenever she passed by. William Brooks, Emma's husband, noticed her preoccupation from across the room where he was deep in conversation with potential investors. "You seem distant tonight," he would say later, but for now, Emma was lost in her growing curiosity. As Sarah emerged from the kitchen carrying a silver platter of canapés, Emma positioned herself strategically by the fireplace. This decision would change everything. "Sarah, before you serve those, could I have a word?" Emma's voice was casual, but her heart hammered against her ribs. "Of course, Mrs. Brooks." Sarah set down the platter and approached, her hands clasped respectfully in front of her. Up close, the bracelet was even more intriguing. Emma could make out tiny details in the metalwork, faces, symbols, what looked like a family crest worn smooth by time and touch. "I couldn't help but notice your bracelet," Emma began, forcing a smile. "It's quite lovely. Is it a family piece?" For just a fraction of a second, something flickered across Sarah's features, surprise, perhaps, or was it fear? Her hand instinctively moved to cover the bracelet, a gesture so protective it made Emma's curiosity burn brighter. "It's nothing special, Mrs. Brooks," Sarah replied quietly. "Just something I've had for a long time." But Emma caught the way Sarah's voice wavered slightly, the way her fingers traced the bracelet's surface as if drawing strength from it. There was a story here, Emma was certain of it. Before she could press further, the sharp ring of her phone cut through the moment like a knife. Emma glanced at the screen, William's business partner, calling at nearly 10 o'clock at night. This couldn't be good news. "Excuse me, Sarah. We'll continue this conversation later," Emma said, already lifting the phone to her ear as she walked toward her study. As the study door closed behind Emma, Sarah remained frozen by the fireplace, her hands still protectively covering the bracelet. But the real shock was still coming, and neither woman had any idea how this single conversation would transform both their lives forever. The bracelet seemed to pulse with secrets in the chandelier's light, waiting to reveal a truth that would shake the very foundation of everything Emma thought she knew about the woman who had been invisible in her home for so long. The phone call ended abruptly, leaving Emma staring at Sarah's retreating figure as she disappeared into the kitchen. That bracelet, something about it gnawed at her mind like an itch she couldn't scratch. The way the light had caught it, the intricate pattern that seemed almost familiar. William, Emma called to her husband as the last guests filtered out of their Manhattan penthouse. Do you know anything about Sarah's background? Her family? William Brooks loosened his tie, exhaustion creeping across his weathered face. At 62, the weight of maintaining their empire was showing. Why would I know about the help's personal life, Emma? We have bigger concerns right now. The tension in his voice wasn't lost on her. Their recent business ventures had been struggling, something William thought he'd kept hidden from her. But Emma noticed everything, the late-night phone calls, the stress lines deepening around his eyes, the way he avoided discussing their investments. I'm just curious, Emma pressed. There's something about that bracelet she wears. It doesn't seem like something you'd buy at a department store. William poured himself a scotch with shaking hands. Emma, we're hemorrhaging money faster than we're making it. The textile factories, the real estate deals, they're all failing. Maybe focus on our problems instead of our maid's jewelry. The revelation hung between them like a thundercloud, but Emma's mind kept drifting back to Sarah. The next morning, she found herself following at a distance as Sarah walked home through the Upper West Side, eventually turning into a modest neighborhood that felt worlds away from their gilded existence. Emma watched from her car as Sarah climbed the steps to a worn brownstone, stopping to help an elderly woman struggling with her groceries. The genuine warmth in Sarah's smile, the careful way she guided the older woman, it painted a picture of someone with deep roots and strong values. When Sarah returned the next day, Emma couldn't help herself. That's a lovely bracelet, Sarah. It has such an unusual design. Sarah's hand instinctively moved to cover the silver band around her wrist. Oh, this old thing? It's nothing special, Mrs. Brooks. Just something I've had for years. But her eyes told a different story. There was a flicker of something, fear? Protectiveness? Sarah's voice caught slightly, and Emma noticed how her fingers traced the bracelet's pattern almost reverently. It looks antique, Emma continued casually. Handcrafted, maybe? I wouldn't know about that, Sarah stammered, then quickly busied herself with dusting the already spotless mantelpiece. If you'll excuse me, I need to finish the guest bedroom. That afternoon, Emma decided to visit Sarah's neighborhood under the pretense of shopping at a local boutique. As she walked past the brownstone, the same elderly woman from yesterday approached her. You're not from around here, are you, dear? The woman asked with a knowing smile. I'm Mrs. Jenkins, Sarah's neighbor. Emma introduced herself, and Mrs. Jenkins' eyes widened with recognition. Oh my, you're Sarah's employer. That girl speaks so highly of you. She works so hard to take care of everyone, never complains, even with all she's been through. What do you mean? Emma asked, her curiosity sharpening. Mrs. Jenkins glanced around conspiratorially. Well, I probably shouldn't say, but Sarah's been struggling something fierce with her grandmother's medical bills. That sweet woman raised Sarah after her parents died, and now she's in an expensive care facility. Sarah works 3 jobs just to keep up with the payments. Emma's heart twisted. Sarah had never mentioned any of this. But you know, Mrs. Jenkins continued, the strangest thing happened last week. Sarah got this mysterious letter with a check inside, enough to cover several months of her grandmother's care. No return address, no explanation. Just signed a friend. As Emma processed this information, Mrs. Jenkins leaned closer. Between you and me, I think it has something to do with that bracelet she always wears. Her grandmother gave it to her, said it was the only thing left from the old country. Sarah treasures it like it's made of diamonds, but... Mrs. Jenkins paused dramatically. But what? Emma whispered. I saw her grandmother once, years ago, when she was still lucid. She kept talking about how that bracelet was worth more than anyone knew, how it held secrets that could change everything. Poor woman was probably just confused from her illness, but she seemed so certain. Emma's blood ran cold. If Sarah's grandmother was right, if the bracelet truly was valuable, then someone else knew about it too. Someone who'd sent that anonymous check, possibly trying to buy Sarah's trust, or her silence. As Mrs. Jenkins waved goodbye and headed inside, Emma stood frozen on the sidewalk, pieces of a much larger puzzle beginning to form in her mind. Who else knew about the bracelet's potential value, and what were they planning to do about it? The weight of Mrs. Jenkins' revelation pressed down on Emma like a physical force as she sat in her pristine living room, watching Sarah dust the mahogany bookshelf with practiced efficiency. The elderly neighbor's words echoed in her mind, "That poor girl lost everything in the fire, everything except what her grandmother left her." Emma's fingers drummed against her crystal water glass as she wrestled with her conscience. Every instinct screamed at her to demand answers, to satisfy the burning curiosity that had consumed her for days. But another voice, quieter yet persistent, whispered about boundaries and respect. She studied Sarah's graceful movements, noting how the woman's hand instinctively protected the bracelet whenever she reached for higher shelves. The moral dilemma twisted in Emma's chest like a knife. Was she becoming the entitled rich woman she'd always promised herself she'd never be? Or was there something deeper at play here, something that demanded investigation? Meanwhile, across town in Sarah's modest apartment, the maid sat at her small kitchen table, staring at an envelope that had arrived with no return address. Inside, a cashier's check for $15,000 and a simple note, "For your medical expenses. A friend." Her hands trembled as she held the check up to the light, searching for any clue about its origin. "This can't be real," Sarah whispered to herself, her voice cracking with disbelief. The number on the check matched almost exactly what she owed for her mother's recent surgery. But who could possibly know about her financial struggles? She'd been so careful to keep her personal life separate from work. The weight of the mysterious gift felt heavier than the bracelet on her wrist, and that was saying something. Back at the Brooks estate, Emma found herself drawn to the dusty attic she rarely visited. Among the forgotten furniture and childhood memories, a leather-bound journal caught her eye. The worn binding felt familiar in her hands as she carefully opened to the first page. William's grandmother's spidery handwriting filled the yellowed pages, and Emma's breath caught as she read the first entry. "The Whitmore bracelet has been lost for nearly 60 years now. Mother always said it would find its way back to the rightful family when the time was right." Emma's heart hammered against her ribs. Whitmore, that was Sarah's maiden name. She'd seen it on employment documents. The journal continued with detailed descriptions of an ornate bracelet, passed down through generations of the Whitmore family before disappearing during the Great Depression. "But that's impossible," Emma breathed, thinking of Sarah's simple piece of jewelry. The description in the journal spoke of emeralds and diamonds, not the modest chain Sarah wore daily. Just as she was connecting the dots, footsteps on the attic stairs made her slam the journal shut. William appeared at the top of the stairs, his expression dark with frustration. "Emma, we need to talk," he said, his voice carrying an edge she rarely heard. "The financial advisors are downstairs, and frankly, we're in deeper trouble than I've been letting on." That evening's dinner felt like a battlefield disguised as fine dining. William sat rigid at the head of their mahogany table, pushing his salmon around his plate while Emma struggled to process everything she'd learned. The crystal chandelier cast dancing shadows that seemed to mirror the tension crackling between them. "You've been distant lately," William finally said, not looking up from his untouched meal. "Is there something you want to tell me?" Emma's fork clinked against her plate. "I could ask you the same thing. When were you planning to mention that we're hemorrhaging money?" "It's complicated, Emma. The market has been brutal, and some investments." "Don't patronize me, William. I may not handle the finances, but I'm not stupid." The silence stretched between them until Sarah appeared in the doorway, hesitant to interrupt. "Excuse me, Mrs. Brooks. Should I clear the—" "Sarah." Emma stood abruptly, causing both Sarah and William to freeze. "That bracelet you wear, where did you get it?" Sarah's hand flew instinctively to her wrist, her eyes wide with surprise and something that looked like fear. It was my grandmother's, ma'am." "Why do you ask?" William looked between the two women, confusion creasing his brow. What's going on here? But Emma barely heard him. She was focused entirely on Sarah, whose face had gone pale as moonlight. The maid's reaction told her everything she needed to know, and nothing she was prepared for. Sarah, Emma said softly, stepping closer, I think there's something about that bracelet that you haven't told me. Something that's about to change everything. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, and she clutched the bracelet so tightly her knuckles went white. When she opened her mouth to speak, her words came out as barely a whisper. Mrs. Brooks, you don't understand. This bracelet, it's not what anyone thinks it is. Emma's hands trembled slightly as she closed the leather-bound journal, her mind racing with the implications of what she'd discovered. The faded photographs and handwritten notes painted a picture that seemed impossible, yet the evidence was right there in black ink. She glanced at her watch. Sarah would be arriving for her evening shift soon. The grand foyer felt different now, charged with an electricity Emma had never noticed before. Every polished surface seemed to reflect secrets, and every shadow held mysteries waiting to be unveiled. She positioned herself strategically near the entrance, her heart pounding with anticipation. When Sarah walked through the door, Emma studied her with new eyes. The simple uniform, the quiet demeanor, the way Sarah's fingers unconsciously touched the bracelet, everything took on new meaning. Sarah, could we talk for a moment? Sarah paused, her brown eyes showing a flicker of wariness. Of course, Mrs. Brooks. Is everything all right? I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday, Emma began carefully, watching Sarah's reaction. About family heirlooms and their stories. The color drained slightly from Sarah's face, but she maintained her composure. What about them, ma'am? Emma pulled out her phone and showed Sarah a photograph she'd taken of a page from the journal, a sketch of a bracelet that looked remarkably similar to the one adorning Sarah's wrist. Does this look familiar to you? Sarah's breath caught audibly. Her hand moved protectively to her bracelet, and for a moment, Emma saw past the maid's uniform to the person beneath, vulnerable, fierce, and carrying secrets that ran deeper than the Hudson River. Where did you find this? Sarah's voice was barely above a whisper. In my own attic, Emma replied, her tone softening. Along with documents that mentioned the Miller family from the 1940s. The admission hung between them like a bridge neither woman was sure they should cross. Sarah's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall, while Emma felt the weight of her own privilege pressing down on her shoulders in ways she'd never experienced. But before either could speak, William's voice boomed from the drawing room. Emma! The Steinbergs are here early for dinner. Where are you? The moment shattered like crystal on marble. Sarah straightened, slipping back into her professional mask with practiced ease. I should get to work, Mrs. Brooks. Sarah, wait. Please, Sarah interrupted, her voice steady but her eyes pleading. Not now. As Sarah disappeared into the kitchen, Emma felt frustration building in her chest. She'd been so close to understanding, so close to uncovering the truth that seemed to dance just beyond her reach. The evening progressed with agonizing normalcy. Emma played the perfect hostess, engaging in conversations about market trends and charity galas while her mind remained fixated on Sarah and the bracelet. Every time she caught a glimpse of Sarah serving dinner or refilling wine glasses, Emma noticed new details, the way Sarah's posture changed when she thought no one was watching, the careful distance she maintained from the family photographs lining the hallway. During dessert, Mrs. Steinberg made an offhand comment about a recent auction at Sotheby's. The most extraordinary pieces often have the most tragic histories, she mused, admiring her vintage Cartier watch. Emma nearly choked on her wine. The words felt like a direct message from the universe, confirming her growing suspicions about Sarah's bracelet. After the guests departed, Emma found herself alone in the kitchen where Sarah was finishing the evening cleanup. The silence stretched between them until Emma couldn't bear it any longer. The journal mentions a theft, she said quietly. Valuable items taken from a family during the war. Items that were never returned. Sarah's hands stilled on the dish she was drying. When she looked up, Emma saw something she'd never seen before, a combination of fear, defiance, and deep, generational pain. Some things, Sarah said carefully, are worth more than money. The admission felt like a confession and a challenge rolled into one. Emma realized they were standing at a precipice, and whatever happened next would change everything between them. Sarah, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Emma's voice was steady but urgent. Is that bracelet? The kitchen door swung open, and William appeared with an expression that made Emma's blood run cold. In his hand was another leather journal, older and more worn than the one she'd found. Ladies, he said, his voice carrying an edge Emma had never heard before. I think we need to have a very serious conversation about family history. Emma stands at Sarah's modest apartment door, her heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and dread. The confrontation she's been avoiding for weeks can wait no longer. When Sarah opens the door, her eyes widen in surprise, then narrow with concern. Mrs. Brooks? What are you doing here? Sarah asks, instinctively touching the bracelet on her wrist. We need to talk, Sarah. About the bracelet. About everything. Emma's voice trembles with emotion as she steps inside the small but immaculately clean living space. Sarah's shoulders sag as she closes the door. I wondered when this day would come. She gestures toward the worn but comfortable couch. Please, sit. Emma notices framed photographs covering every surface, generations of faces, all bearing Sarah's gentle eyes. Her gaze settles on one particular photo, a young woman in 1940s attire, wearing the exact same bracelet. That's my great-grandmother, Rose, Sarah says softly, following Emma's stare. She was a seamstress in Harlem during the war. This bracelet belonged to her. Emma leans forward, her voice barely a whisper. Sarah, I had it appraised. That bracelet, it's not worth $2. Sarah's eyes fill with tears as she nods slowly. I know exactly what it's worth, Mrs. Brooks. It's a 1943 Cartier piece, worth approximately $47,000. The revelation hits Emma like a physical blow. She stares at Sarah, seeing her completely differently now. But why? Why work as a maid when you could sell it in? In what? Sarah interrupts, her voice gaining strength. Live comfortably for a year or two, then have nothing left of her? She touches the bracelet reverently. This bracelet survived the Depression, World War II, the Civil Rights era. It watched my great-grandmother build a life from nothing, watched my grandmother become the first in our family to own property, watched my mother become a nurse despite every obstacle. Sarah stands and walks to her kitchen window, looking out at the neighborhood where she's spent her entire life. My daughter needs surgery, Mrs. Brooks. Spinal surgery that insurance won't fully cover. Every day I look at this bracelet and think about selling it. Every day I choose not to, because some things are worth more than money. Emma feels her world shifting beneath her feet. All her assumptions about Sarah, about worth, about what truly matters, crumble in an instant. Sarah, I had no idea. The stress you must be under, working multiple jobs, carrying this burden alone. I'm not alone, Sarah says, turning back to Emma with a sad smile. Rose is with me. Every time I touch this bracelet, I remember her words, hold on to what makes you strong, baby girl. Money comes and goes, but your roots keep you standing. Emma rises from the couch, her own eyes now wet with tears. How much do you need for your daughter's surgery? $53,000, Sarah replies without hesitation. I've been saving for 2 years. I have $18,000 so far. Without another word, Emma pulls out her phone and makes a call. William? I need you to transfer $53,000 immediately. No, I'll explain later. Yes, I'm sure. She hangs up and looks at Sarah. It's done. Your daughter gets her surgery. Sarah collapses into a chair, overwhelmed. Mrs. Brooks, I can't accept this. You're not accepting charity, Sarah. You're accepting respect. Emma kneels beside Sarah's chair. I've learned more about strength and dignity from you in the past month than I have in my entire privileged life. Keep your bracelet. Keep your heritage. Let me help you keep your daughter healthy too." The two women embrace, barriers of class and circumstance dissolving in shared humanity. Sarah's quiet sobs mix with Emma's whispered apologies for ever doubting her worth. Months later, Emma stands in her living room, but everything has changed. Sarah still works for the Brooks family, but now as their personal assistant at a generous salary. The grand parties continue, but now Emma introduces Sarah as her friend, not her employee. Sarah's bracelet still catches the light during gatherings, but now Emma knows its true story. She watches Sarah laugh with guests, sharing stories of her great-grandmother's resilience, her daughter's successful recovery, and the unexpected friendship that changed both their lives. The real transformation isn't in Sarah's circumstances, though those have dramatically improved. It's in Emma's understanding that worth isn't measured by bank accounts or zip codes. It's measured by the strength to carry on, the wisdom to honor your past, and the courage to hope for something better. As Sarah adjusts her bracelet, now cleaned and polished to shine like the treasure it always was, Emma reflects on the lesson learned. Sometimes the most valuable things in life are hiding in plain sight, worn by the people we overlook every day. This story reminds us that everyone has worth, everyone has a story, and everyone deserves respect regardless of their circumstances. Have you ever discovered something valuable that you initially overlooked? Share your story in the comments below, and remember to subscribe for more inspiring tales about the hidden treasures all around us. Sometimes, the most precious things aren't what we see, they're what we choose to truly understand.